Welcome back to World of Immersion. Today we are going to be ranking the top 5 most overrated roller coasters in the entire state of California. Now recently we just posted the top 5 most underrated roller coasters in the entire state of California, so if you haven't already, be sure to check out that video. It is already up on the channel. But yeah, this is just going to be the most overrated roller coasters. So the rides that we feel like are way too overhyped or get way too much love or some crazy long lines for not as great of a ride. But before we start today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss when we have brand new content out on our channel, and be sure to check out all of our brand new merch. The link is in the description below. With that being said though, let's get right into the video. Alright, so starting off, I just want to preface this by saying that these rides are not ranked in order of how good they are. They're ranked in order of how overrated they are. Meaning the number 1 spot is going to be the most overrated roller coaster, but it's not necessarily the worst roller coaster on this list. With that being said though, let's start off with number 5, and at number 5 we have the Giant Dipper at Belmont Park in San Diego. So not to be confused with Giant Dipper over at Santa Cruz, because that one is actually one of my favorite coasters in the entire state. This one, however, while it is a classic, it is such an incredibly rough ride and really just does not compare to the Giant Dipper over at Santa Cruz. That ride has a really good layout and surprisingly holds up really well for the coaster of its age. It's surprisingly pretty smooth, and it's got some really fun airtime and some great elements. However, the Giant Dipper at Belmont Park, I cannot say the same about. It has pretty much no airtime, and honestly the layout is pretty boring, and like I said before, it is so extremely rough. However, don't get me wrong, it's still a really fun ride, and it's definitely a classic, and it's an icon for San Diego. However, the ride itself is just not that good, especially for how popular it is. It's super expensive to ride as well. I believe it's around $12 for one ride, and really it's not worth it in my opinion. If you're looking for good coasters in San Diego, go over 10 minutes to SeaWorld San Diego for some really phenomenal coasters. Manta and Emperor over there are really fun, and like I said, Giant Dipper is definitely an icon and it's a classic, but the ride itself is just not very good. So that's why it comes in at number 5 on our list. Alright, but coming in at number 4, we have the one and only Silver Bullet at Knott's Berry Farm. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a really fun ride and a great B&M invert, and it definitely has some really good qualities. It's super smooth, the inversions are pretty fun, and it's a pretty long ride. However, in my opinion, it just does not compare to the other inverts out there. It is nowhere near as intense as some of the other inverts, especially as intense as some of the other inverts in California, such as Batman the Ride or Flight Deck over at California's Great America. And in my opinion, it just doesn't feel the same as those other inverts. It's not as whippy, and the inversions are way too drawn out to provide any intensity. Also, for some reason, this ride gets one of the longest lines in the entire park, and I would say it's not even top 3 in the park. I think Ghost Rider, Accelerator, and Hang Time are all better than this ride and provide much more complete ride experiences. But like I said, don't get me wrong, Silver Bullet is still a fantastic ride and definitely a must-do if you're visiting Knott's Berry Farm. However, just compared to the other inverts that are significantly smaller and shorter rides, Silver Bullet just does not even compare. It's nowhere near as intense, and like I said, I much prefer Batman the Ride and Flight Deck over at California's Great America. Alright, and coming in at number 3 is going to be a somewhat controversial opinion, and that is Incredicoaster at Disney's California Adventure. Now, similar to Silver Bullet, this ride is still a fantastic ride, and it's got some great theming on it, obviously, because it is a Disney roller coaster. However, in my opinion, it's one of the weakest roller coasters at all of Disneyland. I would say it's towards the bottom, just barely above Goofy's Sky School and Gadget's Go Coaster. I think all 3 of the other coasters at Disneyland are significantly better than it, even though they're much more of a family coaster than Incredicoaster is. The main reason for this is just the lack of intensity on all of the elements. It goes way too slow to provide any forcefulness and way too fast to provide any hang time, especially on that one loop, and there's practically no airtime on all of those bunny hills. The only small moment of airtime you get is over that one big drop at the beginning after the launch, and also those shoulder harnesses really impact the experience. If this had lap bars, I feel like it probably wouldn't even be on this list. Now, in general, the ride is pretty smooth. However, there are definitely some really rough patches, especially that loop. That vertical loop is one of the worst vertical loops on any coaster I've been on. It is so insanely rough. The train shakes like crazy as it is going over it. I've never experienced something that rough before on a looping coaster. Not even on some of those Aero and SLC loopers. I don't know what it is. It just does not ride the track very well. This ride definitely is in need of a retrack. I think if it got a retrack and was much smoother, it still probably would not be on this list. However, there are definitely other qualities that make it go on this list besides just the roughness on the loop. Like I said before, it's very forceless. There are not very many intense moments, and obviously that is due to it being a Disney roller coaster. However, I would argue there are definitely some more intense rides at Disneyland and California Adventure, like Guardians of the Galaxy, Mission Breakout, and even Radiator Springs Racers can be more intense at some moments. However, like I said, it's still a really fun ride and definitely a must-do if you're visiting Disney's California Adventure, because it's definitely an icon for the park. Also, one more thing to mention, I definitely did prefer California Screamin'. I think California Screamin' had the better ride soundtrack, and I think it just rode better for some reason in my opinion. However, like I said, don't get me wrong, still a fantastic ride, and be sure to check it out. But moving on to number 2, at number 2 we have Goliath over at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Now, I would say this one is not very overrated by coaster enthusiasts, but more so the general public. The general public seems to love this ride. It is a huge, tall roller coaster. It's super fast, and it's insanely smooth. So it makes sense why people would love this ride and wait a ton of time for it. However, for me, it is just so forceless and really not that interesting of a layout. That drop is one of the worst and weakest drops I've been on a roller coaster. I do not understand how you can make a ride that tall and that fast and have the drop be that bad. Almost every other drop in the park is better. You literally feel zero forces. There's barely any force at the bottom of the hill, and there's no airtime even if you're in the back row on that drop. Additionally, there are pretty much no intense moments besides that one helix, which is almost too intense. You're going through it for way too long, and also that mid-course completely stops you. It ruins the second half of the ride because you're just coming to a complete stop in the middle of the ride. And just honestly, I wish Magic Mountain would remove it and replace it with a B&M Hyper. It'd be so much better because right now there's no chance they get a B&M Hyper or an Intamin Hyper because they have Goliath taking up that spot in the park. Alright, however, moving on to the number 1 spot. And at number 1 is another controversial opinion, and that is going to be West Coast Racers. Now, this is a ride that I feel like is very overrated by enthusiasts. Now, it's not a bad layout. Honestly, the ride itself is really fun. It's got some great inversions, some really forceful launches, especially those second launches. However, for me, the main thing that really kills this ride for me are the trains and the restraints. If this ride had a completely different train configuration and some better lap bars, I don't even think it would make this list. However, those comfort collars are so awful, and it has some of the smallest trains on any roller coaster I've been on. They're so uncomfortable to fit into, especially if you're a tall person. And just overall, the ride is really hindered by these restraints. The comfort collars dig into your neck on all of those inversions, basically stopping you from enjoying any of those inversions. So that's why it comes in at the number 1 spot. However, that's going to do it for our video today. Please be sure to comment down below your ranking of your top 5 most overrated roller coasters in California. I know my ranking is definitely going to differ from some people. We have some very controversial opinions on here, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, so be sure to comment down below what your opinion is on the most overrated coasters in California. Thank you so much for watching World of Immersion today, and we'll catch you in the next video.